Hello, I am Dawn Westmoreland, and I'm coming from Asheville, North Carolina, the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains. Radio station is WPVM FM LP 103.7, the voice of Asheville. I have a show called The Empowered Whistleblower, which is about the workplace. We blow the whistle on good things and bad things in the workplace. And in honor of Black History Month, I am bringing in SharRon Jamison, and we're going to talk about SharRon. Not enough is done in the workplace. And I'm going to say it out loud. I've been in HR 32 years, and my whole career, getting into talking about the workplace started with people, not getting the recognition they should, the Black people in the workplace. I remember 5 employees out of about 550 folks in the Veteran Affairs. This is 10 years ago. And I remember seeing only 5 Black employees, and I thought, what the heck? What's going on? With my background in HR, I knew what was going on. It was proven later, racial discrimination and also nepotism. So bringing in SharRon Jamison, SharRon, I just want to say that, you wrote a book, The Strength of My Soul, which I was so honored that you brought me into that. You've written many books. You're a consultant, you're a coach. You're one of the most beautiful souls I know out there. And I know my mother just loves and adores you. SharRon, welcome to the show.
Don, I am so grateful to be here with you. I'm so thankful for an opportunity for us to have meaningful conversation today. And tell your mother I am grateful that she says so many kind words to me. So thank you so much for this opportunity. So very grateful.
So, SharRon, is there enough being done to support Black employees in the workplace?
Gosh, Don, that is such a great question. I have been in corporate America almost 38 years,
Mm.
and I have to be honest to say a lot hasn't changed. What we know about racism is racism mutates and it changes and evolves to ensure that the people who have power stay in power and to ensure that people who are marginalized stay marginalized. But what we don't really think about is that what is the impact, not only on productivity, but our reputation? When you think about corporate America, the largest group of people leaving corporate America are Black women. And people are leaving corporate America because they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard, they don't feel supported. And so, even though we continue to talk about diversity, we continue to talk about change, we continue to talk about the evolving and changing demographics, it's not really trickling down into changing the face and the culture of corporate systems that allow brown and Black people to not only uh, be a part of an organization in a meaningful way, but also allow us to contribute in ways that are dignifying as well as ways that are fruitful.
So with that 38 years of experience, and I know you travel a lot, you meet all kinds of people, all kinds of cultures, all kinds of belief systems. What do you think can be done? And that's a big loaded question.
Yeah.
Go any angle that you want, SharRon.
Sure. When I think about how can corporations address the three greatest human needs when we think about the workplace? The first human need, of course, is safety. Second is belonging. And the third is dignity. And those are three factors that we all need as human beings in order to thrive, in order to bring our best, our healthiest, our happiest, and our most whole self to the workplace. So I like to say there are four key areas that companies can do a better job to make sure that employees are able to give their best, to give their all. The first thing is to really understand, I call being. Being means that allow people to be who they are based on who they are. So often we still expect people to assimilate. We still expect people to code switch and to cover and to change things about their identities, about their personalities, about their lived experiences to fit into this corporate box. And we never really ask ourselves, what's the mental cost of that? What is the cost of masquerading for 8 hours and to wear a mask for 8 hours? How do you think a person is showing up? Do you feel like you're getting the best of them when they have to use their energy to fit in versus to function? And so we never really think about what is the cost of expecting and demanding a person to collude with their own way, their own oppression, to comply with policies and procedures that are demeaning and degrading, to accept microaggressions as and to normalize them, not understanding the impact that that has on the soul. So that is the first pillar, the first awakening that needs to happen in the culture setting, the corporate setting. Are we allowing people to be who they are, and to bring their most whole, the healthiest, happiest, the healthiest, the most healed version of themselves so that they can contribute at a high level? So that's the first thing that companies have to do a better job of doing.
And I have to ask you, what are the obstacles that you've had to overcome as a woman who's of color in the
Yeah.
workplace?
Oh,
I'm sure you've had some.
oh, Don, first, thanks so much for the question. And there have been many. When I got into corporate America, I was called an affirmative action hire. And everybody said it. It was not something that was people hid. Oh, you know what? We got SharRon. We're gonna count her twice. We can count her for a woman and count her as a Black woman. I dealt with a lot of sexual harassment when men felt that they had a right to touch me in inappropriate ways or to speak to me in ways that were too close, like my personal space was violated. And I always felt many times that as a Black woman I was disrespected. It felt very I felt disgraced many times because it was this understanding that I didn't deserve the same respect. And then of course HR at that time had no understanding about diversity, no understanding about power dynamics, no understanding about different lived realities. Diversity, we were doing diversity work since the 1960s, but it had not really trickled in. So diversity back at that time was more about compliance. It was not about compassion. It was not about culture. It was not about anything that allowed a person to maintain their dignity. And I at some points in my career, I felt very depressed. I mean, people would touch my hair. They would say, "Oh, you're so smart. Why did you go to a Black university?" They would say all types of very degrading statements. And when I challenged them on their statements, it was, "Oh, you know what? You're too sensitive. Oh, she didn't mean it like that. You have to really think about the intent of the person. The person, I know them. They would never say that to me." Well, both of you are white. So it was constant gaslighting, constant undermining, constant abandonment. And it made me almost lose the confidence in my abilities to not only advocate for myself, but to do my job. And thank God I had some great therapists and other mentors along the way that had a chance to put Humpty Dumpty back together again when my confidence was really wrecked by constant
Yeah.
discrimination and bias in underhanded comments.
Goodness. Nobody should ever have to go through that. Were you ever labeled the angry Black woman?
I was always the angry Black woman. And it was interesting. It was a lot of tone policing. And tone policing is when the dominant culture feels that they can set the standard on how people talk and how people speak. It's not just about it's the rhythm of how you talk. It's the force of how you talk. It's the volume of how you talk. It's the intonations. It's like you always are being policed about what you're saying. And you find yourself trying to contort your language and your speech patterns to fit, but then you still are policed because whatever you do is never acceptable if it's not in alignment, whatever the standard is. And that standard changes based on who else is in the room. So I was never in a space to feel that my own voice was okay and that my own voice was acceptable. And I couldn't be passionate. I could not be excited. I could not be angry. I had to smile and be non-threatening, and I did not have the right or the privilege to be a human with emotions. I had to be a statue to make sure that the dominant culture felt comfortable with me.
Mm. So many Black women get labeled that, and it just seems unfair when you're trying to speak up and speak your truth and speak the truth. Yes. Now, SharRon, you brought up about mentors. Do you think that's a good thing for people that are colored to have a good mentor to help them in the
Oh,
workplace?
gosh, Don, what a great question. We have to have mentors and we have to have sponsors, and they do very different things. Mentors help you learn a job. They give you skills and give you the wisdom to be able to navigate throughout the corporate systems. But then you need a sponsor to advocate for you in those rooms that you can't get in. You need somebody to call your name, to bring your name up, to be your ambassador. And so you need both, especially when you have a marginalized identity. And to me, because I'm a Black woman, now I'm over 50, I have three marginalized identities. And so there's something that I have to contend with. I think the other two pillars that really align with your question, I talked about. The first pillar is making sure people feel that they can be who they are. The second one is this a place where I feel like I can build? I can build on my skills. I can build on my wisdom. Is this a place that I can build my career? Can I build my competencies? And so that's the second B. Does the environment provide enough space and protection and expansiveness to allow me to build me to as a person, as a professional, as a leader? And it really challenges us to think about our environments that we're in and say, do I provide, or is this what I call healthy soil? Is the soil healthy and fertile so people can grow to their highest level of competence? And I think that many environments and corporate spaces are not places where people can build themselves, are build good teams, are build leadership. And you see that because many times we saw in the pandemic of the great resignation, because people could not build, they could not build their sense of self. Your work environment should be a place where you can even build your confidence, not just your competence, to build your courage. It should be a place where you can build your commitment to your clients, to your colleagues, to the community that you serve. And if there's no building going on, I know that that's a clear indication that that company is not fertile soil, is dry dirt, right? And we see that even in places like Amazon, where you see that maybe it's growing in profits, but however, it's starting is being very people are it's not die it's dying in reputation, it's dying in how it cares for its people. And so we have to think, how can we always be mindful of people and profits? And Amazon is heavy on the profits and lowest people, and even though they keep trying to unionize, it still gets it's still not working. But when a company needs to be unionized, that's a sign that something else is going on. That's a sign that, right? Yeah, that's a sign that people don't feel like they don't have power, and that they're trying to build coalitions just so that they can be treated like humans. So it says a lot.
Nobody has said that in a long, long time or anything like that about unions coming on. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, we think about we think about building. The other thing we have to think about is belonging. That's the other B. And you hear a lot in this DI space about, oh, we have to foster belonging. Well, will never feel like they belong if there's not equity. How can I, as a Black woman, feel like I belong in an organization and there are no Black leaders, no Black women leaders?
Mm.
And so we say that, but we don't see any representation. And then the representation that we see, we don't see them being treated well. And so we have to say we need representation, but also people who are being rewarded uh, in those places. Because I see sometimes when I work with other companies, we see that they might have Black women and Black people in leadership positions, but those Black leaders are catching hell. And they're catching hell from their subordinates. They're catching hell from the leaders. They totally feel unsupported. So those positions become glass cliffs, and then you give them the hardest jobs knowing that they're going to fail. So you almost feel like they're set up for failure. And so, yeah, so we have to think about what does belonging mean? And are we willing to change our structures and our policies and our practices to ensure that so that we can start creating belonging? The structures and the practices will start with equity. That will help us with equity. But people don't understand there will never be belonging without equity. Because many times I go into corporations and they like, oh, we have DI, but all of the lower level people are the brown and Black people, and all the people with leadership are white people. That's not diversity.
Good point, SharRon.
So I think that we have to understand the equities associated with belonging, and people will never feel like they belong if they don't feel like they have a career, that they only have a job. So we have to really think about that.
Yes. And we were talking about this before the interview about all these certificates that are out there on the internet, these DEI certificates. Okay. So you become, quote, an expert in DEI. What are your thoughts on that?
Such a good question. That a certificate doesn't give you enough. I don't care how much education you think you have, you still need experience and expertise. You need leadership skills. You need emotional intelligence skills. You need conflict management skills. You need to understand change management. You need to understand cultural change. You need to understand cultural shifts. You need to understand history. You need to understand politics. You need to understand power dynamics. You need to understand stereotypes. And because based on a stereotype a person has, determine the support that they need. So you have to understand, for example, all people of color don't need the same things because they have different stereotypes. Right. And so I find that if people don't have and don't understand history, politics, sociology, psychology, theology, and understand strategy and system change and culture change, if you don't know all of that, you can't really understand DEI. And I also believe that I feel that companies don't really support or elevate DI to the same position and the same importance as other companies. Because, for example, you'll never let someone be a head of finance or head of marketing or head of sales job, right? You will make sure that they have some experience. But DI, you're like, oh, okay, they have a certificate and they have no experience, but you give them these high level positions. So it's almost like it's a way to undermine the advancement and undermine success, but we can do it in a way that does not that makes us appear that we promote DEI, even though we don't give DEI money, resources, budget, and we don't ensure that the person leading DEI is competent, courageous, and credentialed and experienced. So I feel like there are many ways that companies collude to ensure that DEI is not successful, and that's not only disappointing to me, but it's feels very disingenuous.
Well said. So, do Black people need to be more bold to get ahead in the workplace?
A great question. I think when we talk about how to be more bold, I think that's a hard question to ask. Yeah. Because even though we get the recommendation to be more bold, when we are more bold, we get penalized for it. Yeah. So I always hear people say, well, you need to have a speak up culture. You need to speak up. But of course, that's okay for white women and white men to speak up because it's celebrated and they're protected. If we speak up and we don't speak up the right way, with the right tenor, with the right tone, at the right time when the stars align, we are in trouble. So there's
Yeah.
there's so many other variables that that impact our ability to speak with the fervency and intensity that we need. Now, I want to say, being a Black woman, being an African American woman in a culture is a bold statement. Anyway, my presence is a form of rebellion. My ability to exist in a culture that was not made for me, never considered for me, is a sign of boldness. And so I want to say that because I think many times I hear many from Black women that they don't feel like they're being bold because they're not speaking up. And I say, your presence is a statement. Your presence, knowing that you are going to encounter hell from women, from men, from other Black and brown people who have internalized their own sense of worthlessness, to show up and say, I'm here. That's a sign of great courage. And I want to honor those people and say, even though you might not be speaking up with words, you're speaking up with your witness. And that's something that I want us to acknowledge.
Great. Do you have any people that you admire that are Black, whether they're alive today or they've passed? Anybody that stands out to you?
So many people. One, I would say Toni Morrison. And the reason being, when I watched Toni Morrison's, some of her interviews, she talks about writing for Black people and not feeling as if she needs to write for the white gaze. One of her interviews where interviewers asked her, like, when are you going to start writing for white women? And she said that question is racist in itself. You never ask anybody else, when are you going to write for Black people or other people? You would never say that to a white author because they have since normalized that the story of white people should be the norm, should be the standard, should be the foundation of everything. And I love that she was very clear that she was not going to bow to the white gaze and that she was going to have her voice and have her creativity and not let her creativity be micromanaged or mutilated by outside voices. So I really admire that. I also admire Maya Angelou. She defied the odds. She didn't bend. She said, "This is who I am," and I love her poems about womanhood and "Still I Rise." And so when I feel down, I can look at her poems and feel empowered. I can feel justified in being who I am and not contorting myself to be what society has taught me to be. I also love my dad. My dad, who was a teenage parent, me and my sister finished high school, bachelor's, master's, at the same time as raising a family, working a full-time job, and pastored 2 churches and worked in the community. And so when I think about all that he endured to make sure that he has 4 kids, all of us are college graduates, they're still together after 60 years, and to know that the work that he did in the community to be an example and to be a mentor to so many other Black men makes me proud of my dad. And so I can go on and on about people in my life that I admire. And the people who I admire are people who follow their own conscience and not the crowd. Those are the people who I admire, the pioneers, the trailblazers, the activists, people who knew that they would say something that would challenge the status quo, and they still were willing to take that risk. Because I think many times people, it's easy to say things that are convenient and in something that's endorsed, but it's another thing to say the truth and to speak inconvenient truths in a way with authority, knowing that there will be backlash, but you say it anyway. And those are the people that I honor.
SharRon, do you feel that you're a disruptor? And if you do, why?
Ah, disruptor. Absolutely, yes. I am a disruptor, and I am a disruptor because of how I understand God. I understand that God is a God of multiplicity, and God is a God of love and liberation. I understand that God created all of us in God's own image, and I am just as important as you. But I also know that God has told us that it's our job to make this world a better place. And because of that, and because I realize that I'm the hands of God, the feet of God, the mouth of God on earth, that it's up to me to do what I've been called to do to make this world a better place. And so I am a disruptor. I believe it is my divine authority as a human being, our divine calling as human beings to make sure that we create the world that we need to live in. That we leave the world a better place for our children and our children's children, and that we do our best to challenge the wrongs by professing and activating and voting and protesting the things that need to be right. And so I am a disruptor, and it has cost me positions, it has cost me
Oh,
promotions. I feel that my career has been a career that has been stunted because I spoke up and spoke out pretty much like you have in your career, Dawn. But I always
yeah.
remember the Dr. Martin Luther King when he said that he would never lower his voice to raise his budget. And when I look at him and Malcolm X and all of the other trailblazers of all different nationalities and all different races and persuasions and genders, uh, people who did not compromise. And so that's my prayer. My prayer always is, God, help me to be who you called me to be. Help me to remember who I was before society told me who I was not. And then give me the courage to be her. Because I think that since we all have been so indoctrinated and we have been socialized out of our strengths. So my goal is in prayers, God, help me remember my strengths and remember who I am and help me to do it even if I'm scared.
Oh, I love it. Oh, I just love it. You're just such a beautiful, eloquent communicator. So, as we wrap up, SharRon, I want people to be able to reach out to you if they'd like to. What's your best contact information? Are you on different social media platforms?
Yes, first, thank you so much, Doc, for that. Yes, I'm available. Everything is my name, SharRon Jamison, and that's SharRon, SharRon Jamison. So it's my website, Facebook, YouTube channel, Instagram, TikTok. I'm everywhere. And I would love for people, I have a newsletter that I send out weekly, and I would love for people to sign up for that. And I also have a little private podcast. It's not something that is publicized, but for my community. And it's just that things I learned throughout the week in one of my lives as an associate pastor or as a corporate leader or as an author or as a consultant. I always learn so much from those different settings. And it's the same message, but I might learn it differently or the message might show up differently. And I would love for people to connect with me. And also if they're looking for a speaker or a consultant or an author, I would love to share. I do sister circles or different types of training around corporate trauma. So to help people heal some of those corporate wounds so that they can really contribute to the bottom line in dignity affirming ways. That's the word. Can I contribute in a dignity affirming way?
Awesome. It's so good to have you on my show. And I know your word is powerful. And I know you've been associate pastor for a long time. And people are probably wondering, who is this gal? I mean, she's so powerful and empowering. Thank you so much, SharRon.
Thank you so much, Don, for the opportunity, and I celebrate who you are.
Thank you. And wrapping up, I would like to honor a former supervisor in the Air Force, Chief Robert Kelly. He was a little black man, but he was the most powerful leader that I've ever known. He took care of the people, took care of the mission, and I will never forget him as a mentor and a supervisor. Stay tuned to next time and stay empowered.